After 60, the body stops forgiving our nutritional shortcuts. What once passed quietly through metabolism now lingers, accumulates, and speaks back through inflammation, stiff arteries, fragile bones, and a brain that demands cleaner fuel. Nuts, often praised as universally healthy, are not innocent by default. In this stage of life, some act like quiet allies to longevity, while others behave more like slow saboteurs, stressing systems already working harder to maintain balance. This speech is intended for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Individual nutritional needs vary based on health conditions, medications, and personal circumstances. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional or registered dietitian before making significant dietary changes, especially after the age of 60. With age, the immune system becomes less tolerant of repeated insults, even the subtle ones that arrive disguised as health foods. Nuts that are aggressively processed, roasted at high temperatures, or coated in sugar and refined oils undergo chemical changes that the body recognizes as stress rather than nourishment. The delicate fats inside these nuts, especially polyunsaturated fats, are easily damaged by heat and prolonged exposure to air. Once oxidized, they behave very differently inside the body, no longer serving as building blocks for healthy cells, but instead acting as signals that activate inflammatory pathways. After 60, inflammation is no longer a short-term response that resolves quickly. It becomes a background condition, quietly shaping the health of blood vessels, joints, and organs. The gut plays a central role in this process. Aging alters the composition of the gut microbiome and thins the protective lining of the intestinal wall. When oxidized fats and chemical residues from processed nuts enter this environment, they increase intestinal permeability, allowing inflammatory molecules to pass more freely into circulation. This is not an acute reaction that causes immediate discomfort, which is why it often goes unnoticed, but a slow erosion of immune balance. Over time, this contributes to joint stiffness, heightened sensitivity to allergens, and a persistent sense of low energy that many accept as normal aging. There is also the issue of how the aging liver handles damaged fats. The liver is responsible for detoxifying and metabolizing lipids, but its efficiency declines gradually with age. When repeatedly challenged by oxidized nut oils and additives, it diverts resources away from hormone regulation, cholesterol balance, and glucose control. This subtle metabolic trade-off increases the likelihood of insulin resistance and vascular inflammation, both of which are strongly linked to age-related disease. What appears to be a harmless handful of flavored nuts can therefore exert influence far beyond digestion. Equally important is the way these nuts affect cellular signaling. Inflammation is not merely swelling or pain, it is a language spoken by immune cells. Highly processed nuts amplify inflammatory messages through excess omega-6 fatty acids without the balancing presence of omega-3s. In younger bodies, this imbalance is often corrected through efficient cellular repair, but after 60, repair mechanisms slow, and inflammatory signals linger longer than they should. This persistent signaling accelerates tissue wear, especially in cartilage and connective tissue, where regeneration is already limited. The danger lies not in occasional exposure, but in repetition. When these nuts become daily habits, the immune system is trained to remain on low alert, never fully resting, never fully resolving inflammation. Aging cells respond by conserving energy, reducing repair activity, and prioritizing survival over regeneration. This is how small dietary choices quietly shape the internal environment, turning food from a source of resilience into a chronic biological stressor that the body must manage day after day. After 60, the body becomes less forgiving of invisible toxins and subtle imbalances, and certain nuts amplify these risks in ways that are rarely discussed. Some varieties are particularly susceptible to mold growth during harvesting and storage, especially in warm or humid conditions.
These molds can produce compounds that place a quiet but persistent burden on the liver. In younger years, detoxification systems often neutralize such exposures efficiently, but with age, enzymatic activity slows and cellular repair becomes less responsive. The result is not immediate illness, but a gradual accumulation of metabolic stress that weakens resilience over time. The liver sits at the center of this issue, managing not only detoxification, but also cholesterol synthesis, hormone metabolism, and blood sugar regulation. When it is repeatedly challenged by contaminated or poorly stored nuts, it must redirect energy toward neutralizing harmful compounds. This diversion has downstream effects, subtly altering lipid profiles and increasing oxidative stress in blood vessels. Over years, this contributes to arterial stiffness and endothelial dysfunction, conditions strongly associated with cardiovascular decline after 60. Another overlooked factor is mineral imbalance. Certain nuts contain compounds that interfere with the absorption of essential minerals, such as calcium, iron, and zinc when consumed in excess. In older adults, bone remodeling already slows, and muscle maintenance depends heavily on efficient mineral utilization. When absorption is impaired, the body compensates by pulling minerals from reserves, particularly from bones. This process happens quietly, without pain at first, yet it weakens structural integrity and increases fracture risk over time. Equally significant is the fatty acid profile of some nuts. Those disproportionately high in omega-6 fats can shift the body's inflammatory tone when not balanced with omega-3 sources. Omega-6 fats are not harmful by nature, but they participate in signaling pathways that promote inflammation. In an aging system where inflammatory resolution is slower, excess omega-6 intake keeps immune responses partially activated. This persistent state interferes with joint repair, increases sensitivity to stress, and accelerates tissue aging at the cellular level. There is also a neurological dimension to consider. Chronic exposure to inflammatory compounds and metabolic toxins affects the blood-brain barrier, which becomes more permeable with age. When this barrier is compromised, inflammatory signals reach neural tissue more easily, contributing to cognitive fatigue and reduced mental clarity. The brain, highly sensitive to oxidative stress, responds by conserving energy and reducing synaptic plasticity. Over time, this manifests not as dramatic cognitive loss, but as slower processing and diminished resilience to mental strain. The risk is compounded by the assumption that all nuts are inherently protective. This belief encourages overconsumption without attention to quality, storage, or balance. In reality, after 60, the body responds less to nutritional labels and more to biochemical integrity. Nuts that carry hidden toxins, promote mineral loss, or skew inflammatory signaling do not merely fail to support health, they subtly undermine it. The damage is cumulative, shaped by repetition rather than excess, and by neglect rather than intent, gradually influencing longevity through pathways that operate beneath conscious awareness.
In later life, nutrition becomes less about quantity and more about biological compatibility, and certain nuts demonstrate an almost remarkable alignment with the needs of aging cells. These nuts are not merely sources of calories or fats, they function as delivery systems for minerals and compounds that support cellular stability. Magnesium, potassium, and trace elements found in them play critical roles in maintaining nerve signaling, muscle contraction, and cardiac rhythm. After 60, even minor deficiencies in these minerals can manifest as fatigue, irregular heartbeat, or muscle weakness, making foods that supply them in a bioavailable form especially valuable. What distinguishes these beneficial nuts is the quality of their fats. Their fatty acids integrate smoothly into cell membranes, improving membrane fluidity, which is essential for efficient nutrient exchange and cellular communication. Aging membranes tend to become more rigid, impairing the ability of cells to respond to hormonal signals and repair instructions.
When these supportive fats are incorporated into daily nutrition, they subtly restore flexibility at the cellular level, enhancing responsiveness without overstimulation. These nuts also contain plant compounds that interact intelligently with oxidative stress. Rather than overwhelming the system with aggressive antioxidant activity, they modulate oxidative processes, allowing the body to neutralize free radicals without disrupting necessary signaling pathways. Oxidative stress is not inherently harmful. It becomes damaging when unchecked. After 60, the challenge is not elimination, but regulation, and these nuts assist in maintaining that balance, protecting tissues while preserving normal cellular function. The digestive system benefits as well. Aging reduces digestive enzyme production and alters gut motility, making nutrient absorption less efficient. Nuts that are easier to digest and rich in supportive fats stimulate bioflow and enhance the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins such as A, D, E, and K. This indirect support strengthens bone health, immune response, and skin integrity, areas often affected by aging. Instead of burdening digestion, these nuts cooperate with it, making nourishment more efficient rather than more demanding. There is also an endocrine effect that unfolds quietly over time. Stable fats and minerals contribute to improved insulin sensitivity and more consistent energy release. Blood sugar spikes and crashes place significant stress on aging systems, accelerating fatigue and inflammation. By slowing digestion and stabilizing glucose absorption, these nuts reduce hormonal volatility, allowing the body to operate in a more predictable and efficient metabolic rhythm. Perhaps most striking is the way these nuts support repair without excess stimulation. Aging tissues require gentle, sustained nourishment rather than aggressive intervention. The compounds within these nuts encourage cellular maintenance pathways associated with longevity, supporting repair mechanisms without triggering inflammatory responses. This is a subtle form of nourishment, one that aligns with the body's reduced regenerative speed after 60. Over time, the consistent inclusion of such nuts reshapes the internal environment. Cells operate with greater efficiency, stress responses soften, and the body maintains equilibrium with less effort. Rather than forcing change, these foods enable cooperation between nutrition and physiology, allowing the aging body to preserve function through quiet daily reinforcement that accumulates into meaningful resilience.
The aging brain is not simply a smaller or slower version of its younger self. It is a structure that has accumulated experience, stress, and biochemical wear over decades. Certain nuts interact with this reality in ways that are unusually precise. Their fatty acid profiles mirror the composition of neural membranes, particularly in regions responsible for memory and emotional regulation. When these fats are supplied consistently, they support the integrity of synapses, the tiny junctions through which thoughts, memories, and emotions pass. After 60, synaptic loss is less about sudden decline and more about gradual erosion, and these nutrients slow that erosion by reinforcing structural stability. Beyond structure, these nuts influence neuroinflammation, a quiet but powerful driver of cognitive aging. Microglial cells, the immune sentinels of the brain, become more reactive with age. When chronically activated, they release inflammatory compounds that interfere with neurotransmitter balance and neuroplasticity. The bioactive compounds in certain nuts temper this response, reducing excessive activation without suppressing essential immune surveillance. This balance allows the brain to remain vigilant without becoming self-destructive. Oxidative stress plays a parallel role in cognitive aging. The brain consumes a disproportionate amount of oxygen, making it especially vulnerable to free radical damage. Over time, oxidative injury affects mitochondrial function within neurons, reducing their ability to generate energy efficiently.
Specific antioxidants found in these nuts localize to neural tissue, where they support mitochondrial resilience rather than merely scavenging free radicals. This preservation of energy production translates into sustained attention, mental endurance, and clearer thinking across the day. The vascular dimension is equally important. Cognitive health depends heavily on consistent cerebral blood flow. Some nuts support endothelial function, improving the elasticity of blood vessels that supply the brain. Improved circulation enhances oxygen and nutrient delivery while facilitating the removal of metabolic waste. In aging individuals, even slight improvements in vascular efficiency can significantly influence cognitive performance, mood stability, and resistance to mental fatigue. There's also a subtle effect on neurotransmitter synthesis. Certain amino acids and micronutrients present in these nuts contribute to the production of serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine, chemicals essential for motivation, memory, and emotional regulation. As production of these neurotransmitters naturally declines with age, dietary support becomes increasingly relevant. Rather than forcing stimulation, these nutrients provide the raw materials the brain requires to maintain equilibrium. Over time, the cumulative effect of these interactions becomes evident. The brain responds to stress with greater flexibility, recovers more quickly from fatigue, and maintains sharper cognitive boundaries between focus and rest. This is not the preservation of youth, but the cultivation of resilience. By reinforcing structure, moderating inflammation, and supporting energy metabolism, these nuts align with the brain's evolving needs after 60, allowing cognition to remain adaptive and responsive within the constraints of aging, rather than succumbing to gradual decline through unaddressed biochemical vulnerability.
After 60, the body's relationship with food becomes increasingly sensitive to rhythm and proportion, and certain nuts uniquely support this shift toward metabolic steadiness. These nuts do not provoke the sharp insulin responses that accelerate cellular aging. Instead, they slow digestion and create a gradual release of energy, allowing blood sugar levels to remain stable for longer periods. This stability reduces the hormonal turbulence that strains the pancreas and adrenal system, organs that already face cumulative stress after decades of regulation. Satiety plays a critical role in this process. Aging alters hunger signaling, often dulling the sensation of fullness or, conversely, triggering cravings driven by blood sugar fluctuations rather than true nutritional need. Nuts that are rich in healthy fats and fiber interact with gut hormones such as leptin and ghrelin, reinforcing accurate appetite feedback. When these signals are reliable, eating becomes more intuitive and less reactive, reducing the tendency toward overeating that quietly burdens metabolism over time. The slower metabolic pace after 60 also means that excess calories are handled differently. What once might have been burned through activity or rapid metabolic turnover now has a greater chance of being stored as visceral fat. This type of fat is metabolically active and contributes to systemic inflammation. The right nuts counter this process by improving insulin sensitivity and promoting lipid utilization rather than storage. Their fats signal the body to use energy efficiently, supporting lean tissue maintenance while discouraging inflammatory fat accumulation. There is also an effect on stress physiology. Blood sugar instability triggers cortisol release, a hormone that, when chronically elevated, accelerates muscle loss, bone density reduction, and cognitive fatigue. By stabilizing glucose levels, these nuts indirectly moderate cortisol patterns, supporting a calmer internal environment. This hormonal balance is essential for preserving muscle mass and bone strength, both of which decline more rapidly when stress hormones remain elevated. Beyond metabolism, these nuts encourage a behavioral shift toward moderation. Their dense nutritional profile means smaller portions deliver meaningful nourishment. Over time, this reshapes eating habits away from volume and toward quality.
This behavioral adaptation aligns with the aging body's reduced tolerance for excess, fostering a pattern of consumption that emphasizes sufficiency rather than abundance. The cumulative impact of this moderation is profound. Consistent blood sugar stability reduces oxidative stress, improves sleep quality, and supports immune regulation. Energy becomes more predictable, allowing daily activity without the peaks and crashes that erode motivation and resilience. Rather than forcing the body into aggressive metabolic performance, these nuts support cooperation between dietary intake and physiological capacity. In this way, nourishment becomes a form of quiet regulation. Each serving reinforces metabolic order, hormonal balance, and efficient energy use. The body responds not with dramatic change, but with steadier function and reduced internal friction. Over months and years, this daily reinforcement shapes an internal environment where aging unfolds with less metabolic conflict, allowing longevity to be supported through consistency, restraint, and alignment with the body's natural tempo.